Hello, Bill Molyneux here for Bill's Wargame World and Bill's History World, and I'm with Goober the Traveling Bear, and we are at the Maryland Veterans Memorial Museum in Newburgh, Maryland, La Plata, Maryland, and we are here to work on videos today for both the Vietnam room for weapons of the Vietnam era, and also we're going to be discussing the Korean War room and weapons of the Korean War. So Mr. Nel and Miss Connie, the ambassadors here, will be giving us a tour for both of those rooms today. And the date is March 17th, 2024. Fully Goober approved, one of his favorite museums. Hello everyone, I'm with Mr. Nel here at the Maryland Veterans Museum, Memorial Veterans Museum. Is that correct, Mr. Nel?
That's correct.
And Mr. Nel, what are you going to talk to us about today?
Well, I'll try to go over some of the weapons that were used by both U.S. Allied forces and the Communist forces during the Third Vietnamese conflict. And hope you get something out of it. And I'll do my best without getting too nerdy and deep dive and then too involved in it. So,
all right, so where are we going to start?
Well, we're going to start with this. We're going to start with the pre-1965 era. A lot of them, the American advisors of pre-1965, those who were like Ranger qualified infantry officers and NCOs, were acting as advisors to the South Vietnamese Ranger battalions. A lot of them were armed with World War II issue M1 carbines like this. And then some of them were also armed with these weapons as well. Let me find some here. And some of the pre-1965 advisors were armed with M1 and M2 carbines. This is the M2 version of the M1 carbine from the Second World War in Korea. What makes this called the M2 is because this was a select fire weapon. As you can see here, that little switch right up there enabled it to fire from semi-full automatic mode. These were developed during the tail end of World War II. Did not see really a lot of use or no uses at all, but they were heavily used by American forces during the Korean conflict. Another weapon you see here, it was a replacement to the rifle grenades that were used, rifle grenade launchers that were used in World War II in Korea. This is a 40mm M79 grenade launcher, affectionately known as sometimes known as the thumper or the blue tube. And I can show you some.
All right.
Now, as I explained, if you're the grenadier of a rifle squad or a fire team, you're issued this single-shot 40mm grenade launcher. Unfortunately, that was at the time that was the only weapon. Other than that, you only had a .45 caliber sidearm. So some troops, some of the grenadiers, did not like that. So what Colt Industries did, that they developed these grenade launchers.
Okay.
Now going back to the grenade launchers, what Colt did, because some grenadiers did not like the idea of having only that single shot 40mm grenade launcher, they came up with this attachment underneath the rifle barrel known as the XM148. X stands for experimental. As you can see this picture here of a 4-man Australian SAS patrol, they all have grenade launchers. These three here have an XM148 under these two with their M16, this soldier with his FN FAL, but you can barely see this soldier's. His M16 has the much newer M203 grenade launcher that came about after the XM148. The XM148 had ran into some problems, and so it only lasted maybe a year or so on duty until Colt replaced it with a much newer M203.
Okay.
As like I said, the XM148 was not a very successful weapon, so Colt came out with a much newer design known as the M203 that was attached underneath the barrel of an M16 rifle. And this one here, as you can see, is attached on the Air Force version of the M16 that was known as the 603. I'm sorry, the 601. And this picture of this Montagnard soldier shows the M203 also fitted underneath the Colt Commando carbines, also known as Car 15 carbines. But again, there are some grenadiers who did not like that idea of the extra weight on the barrel of their M16 or Car 15 carbines. What happened was, in the close confines of the jungle, it proved a little bit of the extra. They didn't like the extra weight. It was kind of clumsy to maneuver around in close confines of a jungle. So what some of the grenadiers did, they carried. Now they opted to carry the M79 with the rifle, but they did something to it. They modified the M79s, and I'll show you what they did.
All right.
Go ahead.
Yep.
All right. Like I said, some of the troops did not like the extra weight of that M203 or XM148 grenade launcher underneath the rifle barrels. So they came up they would take an M79 like this one, like this LURP did, and he would chop the shoulder stock off the M79. So he carries both an M79, and you can see here his Car 15 carbine. And I can show you further modifications of the M79. Some soldiers, especially those in the special forces and in MACV-SOG, took it a bit further, not only chopped the shoulder stock, but chopped some of the barrel and the hand grip down much shorter. A lot of troops jokingly call this the pirate gun. And so they have both a pirate gun and a carbine and a rifle with them. In fact, the M79 and then even the pirate gun variation of it, even though it was already outdated by the mid to late 1970s and replaced by the M203, it soldiered on with special operations forces well into the global war on terror, even in the pirate gun configuration.
Wow.
Okay, now let's get to 1965. Basically, when LBJ committed conventional forces in the South Vietnam, a lot of early Marines and soldiers carried with them an M14 rifle. Basically, the M14 is nothing more than a re-engineered M1 Garand. You can just look at it, and if you know what M1 Garands look like, it's basically the same thing. The only thing is, the gas system here, the operating rod, had been shortened down, and Garand originally wanted the not the M1 carbine, but the M1 Garand rifle to be fed with a 20-round BAR magazine. Well, they got their wish this time, only instead of 30-06, it uses a 7.62 NATO round. It's basically almost the same as a 30-06 in terms of kinetic energy and ability. And the only thing other than that makes it a little bit more different is right here, if you can see that, that's the selector lever that you can switch the M14 to fire semi and full automatic. Now, the trouble with the M14 was the first time American soldiers got into a major firefight with the army of the North Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese Army, or sometimes they've been known as the People's Army of Vietnam. First time they encountered them in combat, they were armed with AKMs or the Chinese version Type 56. The M14 is very uncontrollable in full automatic mode. A lot of the soldiers and Marines who first encountered the PAVN in combat with the Type 56 or the AKM were heavily overmatched. The M14 cannot fire full automatic in the very controlled setting. It's very uncontrollable, and the only way the soldiers can overwhelm the North Vietnamese firing their AKs at full auto at them was to use their M60 medium machine guns, and I can show you what they look like.
All right.
Okay. This was the replacement M60 general purpose machine gun that replaced the Browning 1919 air-cooled and water-cooled machine guns that American forces used in World War II in Korea. What makes this different was there was a lot of German influence on the M60. A lot of the designers took the feed tray and feed mechanisms of the German MG42 and the gas operating system of the FG42, which is the Fallschirmjäger Gewehr 42 paratrooper rifle. The Browning machine guns used the inertia from the recoil in order to feed rounds into the mechanism, whereas this uses a gas-operated system that's similar to that of Browning automatic rifle or the British Bren light machine gun that's magazine fed.
All right, take it away.
Okay. Now, the M60 machine gun, like I said, replaced the old Browning M1919 air-cooled and water-cooled machine guns from World War II in Korea. Now, it's a heavy weapon, over 23 pounds. That's not fully loaded. So some machine gunners assigned to the LRPs, long-range recce patrols, special forces, or SOG, or even SEALs, they lightened the machine gun. What some of them did, they removed the shoulder stock, the front bipod, the carrying handle, and even the rear sight, trimmed down maybe 5 pounds or so. So an M60 being a crew-served weapon of 3 became an individual weapon of 1, for especially those if you're in a long-range reconnaissance patrol or in MACV SOG. So basically you're carrying this by yourself, but so you want to lighten the load up, and I can show you some further modifications.
Now, how much ammunition would that person be carrying on them?
It's common to have upwards up to 400 rounds, but you also have other members of the squad or your LRP team, they would carry an extra belt with them. So sometimes when you see pictures, Vietnam pictures of other troops carrying belts, that's for the machine gunner.
Okay.
And because in some units, like the LRPs and SOGers, you're only operating in 6 to 8 man teams. So you don't have an assistant gunner, you don't have an ammo bearer. You're it. So
okay.
Since you're it in that LRP team, that 6 to 8 man LRP team, you got to find ways to lower the weight of that weapon and possibly carry extra rounds. So let me give you another demonstration.
Okay.
Well, talk about GI innovation. This M60 here, carried by probably those in MACV SOG or SEALs, not only, like I said earlier, they removed not only the shoulder stock, the bipod, front side carrying handle, but they even chopped the barrel down up to the gas piston, take out some more weight. And this monstrosity here is a 500 round box carried on a backpack.
They had to weigh a lot.
That had to weigh a lot. So if they find out you're the Army powerlifting champion of the 5th Special Forces Group, and they say, hey, guess what? You're now the machine gunner of this MACV SOG recon team.
All right.
And I can show you some more usage of the M60. And as you can see, the M60 was pretty versatile. It'd be used as a door gunner on UH-1 troopship helicopters. Okay. And this early gunships, before the Cobras came about, you can see 2 M60s on each side of this gunship, a single 7-shot rocket pod, about 60 millimeter in caliber. And if you can see these 2 door gunners here, they have their own individual M60 machine gun. So
wow.
Talk about added firepower.
Quite amazing. All right.
And like I said before, the designers of the M60 drew inspiration from the German MG42. And what they also noticed about the MG42 is its quick barrel change capability. So this is a picture taken from the 80s. You see these Air Force airmen practicing an M60. And you can see how the barrel is easily removable because there's a switch here, you turn it, that'll disengage the barrel, and you can just remove it and put in a new barrel. Whereas the old Browning machine guns pretty much have to use like a screwdriver to replace that barrel. But unlike the MG42's barrel, quick change barrel, this kind of was inspired almost like from the British Bren light machine gun.
All right. Well, Mr. Nel, where are we at now?
Well, we're going to talk about 2 weapons It's been debated to death, but the topic will not go away. The United States M16 and the Soviet-made AKM, some people call it the AK-47. And the difference between an AK-47 and an AKM is AK-47 came about, designed in 1947. It's the manufacturing of it was done different. Even though it was developed in 1947, it didn't really go in the hands of Soviet forces almost like well into the 50s or so, because it still took years to develop and refine. The equipment they used, the manufacturing tools they needed to make the AK-47, well, the Soviet Union hadn't perfected stamping metals yet. So everything in the old AK-47s, everything was machined from a big hunk of steel and machined to this. It became the AKM. M stands for modernized, which has been some people incorrectly thought it was machine gun. No, it's not. M stands for modernized. The Soviet Union finally learned how to stamp metals. So then they were able to make and produce AK-47s at a cheaper cost. And they even added some modifications to the new AKMs, where if you can see the barrel here. Okay, I don't know if you can see this, but on the modernized version, if you can see that muzzle device there, that was not on the 47. That's a kind of a muzzle flash device on the tip of the muzzle of the newer AKM. The Chinese version of it was called a Type 56. Now, history gives credit to Mikhail Kalashnikov developing the AK-47, hence automatic Kalashnikov. It's been said that, well, he claims that he was influenced by German design or captured Sturmgewehr 44s for the AK-47. He may not have copied the Sturmgewehr, but if you look at both weapons, he was influenced by them. The AK-47, later on, he did admit that he took the operating rod, the bolt carrier, from the M1 Garand and put it on the AK-47, only made it upside down. The gas operating system is similar to that of the Sturmgewehr. Even the sight radius, the front and rear sight radius, is like that of the Sturmgewehr. And then it doesn't, like the AK has a reciprocating charging handle when it fires. That means that that bolt goes back and forth. Like the Sturmgewehr, it doesn't have a bolt lock, where when you fire the last round, bolt locks back into position. It will fire, and then if you fire the last chamber, squeeze the trigger, you get a click. The Sturmgewehr is the same way. And even both rounds, the 7.62-39 and the 7.92x33 used by the Sturmgewehr, have similar performances. And even the magazine looks similar.
Okay.
The other communist weapon used by the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces was the SKS carbine. It is a Simonov design, not Kalashnikov design, because people think they see that gas tube above the barrel, they think, oh, it's Kalashnikov. No, it's not. It was designed by Sergei Simonov. It was developed in 1944, 1945, at the tail end of World War II. Even this design was pretty much outdated by the time it was issued to Russian forces. If you're familiar with Russian anti-tank rifles, basically the SKS they took a PTRS anti-tank rifle and shrunk it down to this SKS. It fires the 7.62x39 millimeter round that's fired also by the AKM. Sometimes historians get it wrong. They give Kalashnikov credit for that intermediate round. No. The Simonov rifle started using the 7.62x39 before Kalashnikov did. It's only been fed. It doesn't have a magazine, an external magazine like the AKM. It's fed only by an internal magazine fed by 10-round stripper clips. It's semi-automatic only. It's not select fire. Now, even though it fires the same round as the AKM, the SKS is more accurate and has a longer range. The Chinese version of the SKS is called the Type 56. And as you see here, has that folding spike bayonet on it. Now, even though the AKM is more advanced and can outclass the SKS, the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong took whatever weapons they can get their hands on. Okay, now let's talk about the very most controversial weapon in the entire Vietnam War that even lasts till this day. The Armalite, also known as the AR-15, also known as the M16. This is an early 60s version of the Armalite. It was made by Colt, known as the SP-1. The first branch of the military to actually adopt it was the United States Air Force. Then Air Force Chief of Staff Curtis LeMay, who led bombing campaigns over Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan during the Second World War, wanted new weapons to replace those base security forces. They still had outdated hand-me-down weapons from World War II, like M1 carbines, M2 carbines. He needed something more. Colt representative invited General LeMay to a barbecue picnic and gave him a shooting demonstration, and he was so impressed by it, he said, let's do it. LeMay tried to get the United States Army to test it for him. Well, the Army bureaucracy said, no, we don't like that. They rejected the AR platform the same way they rejected Eugene Sonner's AR-10 because it was not invented by the government. It was invented by private industry. It's not like a rifle of conventional time. Everything about it was different. It's not wood and steel, which is what the old bureaucrats in the Ordnance Department want. They want their wood and steel. They want their M14. They didn't care about the after-action reports they heard from forces being overmatched by AKMs and Type 56 rifles. So LeMay said, I'm getting them anyway. So the Air Force was the first one to get the M16, but they were called 601 rifles. And let me show you the next picture here.
Good.
This is a pre-1965 Special Forces advisor. Now, he is holding the 601. What happened was Colt managed to get the South Vietnamese government to purchase some of the 601 rifles. Some of the Special Forces advisors saw these South Vietnamese soldiers they were training. They said, hey, where did you get that? They told them about it. So they took the 601s, tested it out themselves. They loved it. They loved its lightweight. They loved the deadly hydrostatic effect the 5.56 round had on enemy forces. So they themselves approached Colt and through other channels got the 601 rifles with the pre-1965 Special Forces advisors. What made the M16 round different from, let's say, the 308 NATO round or the AK round, the 5.56 round coming out of a 20-inch barrel of an M16, or back then, the 601, was at a velocity of 3,000 to 3,100 feet per second. It's a light 55 grain round. Basically, some people call it a hyped up 22. Well, it's more than that. The high velocity of that round, once it hits tissue, what it does, the round becomes unstable and yaws or it tumbles. Not only it tumbles, it breaks apart. And then individual fragments cause more tissue damage. There was a story of a pre-1965 Special Forces advisor and leading combat operations where they had shot a Viet Cong soldier, insurgent, on the leg, but then the round, when it became unstable and tumbled, it ended up damaging his abdominal cavity. So if it did that being shot in the leg, picture what it would happen if you got hit in the head or thoracic cavity. Now then, the early 601s, American and Australian military advisors praised it. In fact, they even nicknamed it, they called it the meat axe for a good reason. Like I said, when the 5.56 rounds hit body tissue, it tumbles upon impact, and then the fragments causing more traumatic tissue damage and what experts called hydrostatic shock. The first time the M16 fell into the hands of conventional forces in combat was during the Battle of Ejang Valley. Prior to that, the United States Army had did this one stop buy of about 80 to 100,000, back then called the XM16E1. They fired what's known as the IMR stick powder. IMR stands for Improved Military Rifle. The stick powder was designed specifically for that M16 rifle to burn properly, provided the correct gas pressure on the gas port. And then it's during its first combat debut against North Vietnamese forces in the Battle of Drang Valley in November 1965 against the 7th Cavalry, it was a game changer. In fact, Major General Hal Moore, then Lieutenant Colonel Moore, when he was interviewed about the early M16, how did it affect the Battle of Drang Valley? General Moore said it made all the differences in the world. It was a game-changing rifle. The weapon was controllable in full automatic. It was more accurate, had a longer range. It met the AK. They were able to confront AK or Type 56 toting NVA soldiers on an equal basis. Now, after that incident, when Westmoreland read about the after-action report, he ordered all ground forces, Army and Marines, to be equipped with the M16E1. Then Secretary of Defense McNamara ordered the United States Armies develop this weapon further and make sure it's ready for combat uses for all forces. All right. So Defense Secretary McNamara ordered the XM16E1 to be further developed and then get it ready for widespread combat usage. Well, Army Ordnance Bureau stuck with very traditional-minded, unbending, unwavering bureaucrats wanted to know, we want our beloved steel and wood M14. They actually sabotaged the M16. They did not want it. They hated it the same way they hated the AR-10 because it wasn't invented by the government. So what they did, they changed the propellant from the stick powder that was designed for this weapon to surplus ball powder. And what happened was that ball powder burned at a different rate. So what happened was you got this. On this rifle here, switching the ball powder, what happened was it burned at a different chamber pressure, much higher chamber pressure. Not really chamber pressure, but what happened is it affected the dwell time. So when the round is going through here, when the round is going through the tube and when it passes this point, that's called dwell time. That's when the gas goes up to this port and then the gas goes right through this tube and the tube pushes okay?
Yeah.
Okay, then there's a gas tube here, and then it goes into this chamber on this bolt carrier, and it pushes the piston that's in here, and then what happened is changing it to that ball propellant affected, causing overgassing, and it affected the dwell time and the timing. So we had a chamber, the bolt carrier was cycling at a much more violent, faster rate than what's meant to be. It caused damage to the bolt carrier. Not only damage, but the increased gas pressure on the port, what it did, caused misfeeds, failure to eject, double feeds. Not only that, as you can see here, that's the buffer right there. The recoil spring is in that right there. It's also in that stock.
Wow.
Now, because of the increased gas port pressure, overgassing, the buffer was too light to handle that. To make matters worse, back then, the rifles were not chrome. The chamber and bore were not chrome plated, and the powder residue was very corrosive. And then the bureaucrats and Ordnance Bureau said, let's not issue any cleaning kits because somehow they got it in their heads that the rifle was self-cleaning. There's no such thing as a self-cleaning rifle. That's when you had disasters. That's when you started having stoppages. Unfortunately, it took it had to take an act of congressional hearing to finally straighten it out. There have been the Ordnance Bureau ignored complaints. There were even television and newspaper articles written about it. And still Ordnance Bureau ignored the complaints and the problem. So finally, like I said, 1968, there was a congressional inquiry as to what went wrong. They found out that Ordnance Bureau was negligent. The average troop, it was not his fault. He knew what he saw. He didn't know there was bureaucracy. He didn't know there was stubbornness on the Ordnance Bureau that they hated this rifle. And changing also from the ball propellant that burned at a higher gas pressure here in the port, and the powder residue was also corrosive, and not cleaning your weapon leads to disaster.
Okay.
So after the 1968 congressional hearings, finally Ordnance Bureau was ordered, listen, you need to straighten that out. And so a lot of heads rolled because of that. And so instead of switching to the IMR stick powder it was originally designed to do, they remodeled the rifle called the M16A1 to work with the current ball powder that they were using. But other things they did was this. They put they chrome lined the chamber and the barrel, the bore inside. The port on the gas, the port was reduced, the opening in the gas port was reduced to allow for the overpressure. The gas tube inside was changed to stainless steel material. And then the bolt carrier, this is a civilian bolt carrier, not a military bolt carrier. The bolt carrier was given a manganese phosphate coating on it. It was made ruggedized and heavier because what happened was the overgassing in the early bolts was destroying this part of the bolt right there. It was destroying that because of the overpressure, overgassing. So they ruggedized this and coated it with a manganese phosphate. And like I said, the chamber and bore were chrome plated. Even the buffer here was made heavier. The early 601 had this what's called a duck-billed open prong muzzle flash. It was replaced by this called birdcage. There's an enclosed birdcage muzzle flash. The barrel was made heavier as well. And the most important thing about it was the issuance of a cleaning kit. Now in a cleaning kit.
All right, Mr. Nel, where are we at now? We're on the cleaning kit?
The cleaning kit. One of the most important things that came out of the improvement of the M16A1 was the issuance of this cleaning kit. So what they did on the stock of the M16A2, there's a trap door on that stock. Open that compartment, that's where the cleaning kit goes. And before, there was no issuance of cleaning kit. Where they got the notion that the weapon was self-cleaning, some say it came from Colt.
Wow. Well, do you want to end our Vietnam weapons video here?
I can talk about one more thing.
All right, let's pause the camera and you take me to that area.
All right. The last thing I want to talk about of the Armalite platform was, even though the M16 is lighter and shorter than the M14, there's still troops from the LRPs, Long Range Recce Patrol, Special Forces, MACV-SOG, who wanted a shorter version of that rifle. It came out with this. Colt came out with this. It was first known as the XM177. Let me show you one.
Okay.
So Colt answered the calls from the LRPs and the Special Forces, came out with what's known as the XM177. There were two models. The 177 had a 10.5-inch barrel. Well, it had some cycling issues, things like that. You reduce the barrel length of a weapon, you have problems. you have overgassing and things like that. So they came out with a newer version, XM177E1. All they did was lengthen the barrel by 1 inch, and that improved the cycling of the weapon. Now what this device here is known as a moderator. When you reduce the length of a barrel of a rifle, it makes a tremendous muzzle flash. And not only that, it increases the report of the weapon. What the moderator did was reduce that muzzle flash. Now, did it reduce the level of the decibels? I don't really know. Some say it did, but I don't really know. I don't really know. So here is a loadout from ALERT. Again, the acronym stands for Long Range Reconnaissance Patrol. You see this, Car 15. This one is the XM77E2 version because it has this forward assist. And I forgot to tell you about the forward assist, and I will tell you in a little bit here what it does. And the E2 has this forward assist and has a 10, and then has the 11.5-inch barrel. And you can see 20 round, standard issue 20 round magazines. And each pouch here, even though they were designed, this 1956 pouch was designed to hold 2 M14 magazines. Well, Saugers or LERPs can stuff upwards up to 4 magazines in each ammo pouch. All right. And the final thing I forgot to mention of the newer, well, the XM16E1 had it, and it was carried over to the M16A1. The early 601 rifles did not have this device known as a forward assist. The forward assist was put there so the round properly. The forward assist was to push it in and it seats the round in the battery. Colt and Stoner did not like that idea. They figured if that round did not seat, you need to get rid of that round, just eject it. Well, Colt said, the Army said they wanted it anyway and they won their case. A lot of times, though, the forward assist, and I've done it before, the forward assist is basically used to, when you do a press check, what a press check is slightly pull the charging handle back, and you just check to see if there's a round in the chamber, push it forward just to make sure the round seats.
Wow.
I have never used the only time I've used the forward assist is like that, doing what's called a press check. Slightly pull charging handle back, check to see if there's a round. That's it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Nel, for your Vietnam talk here. And where are we? And can you mention that?
We are in Newburgh, Maryland, the Maryland Veterans Museum. We'd like for you to come by, check us out. Come, please come visit. Bring your family and friends. And we have special activities coming up next month. And the Taste of Southern Maryland is coming up next month. Hope everybody can come by and visit us.
All right. And everyone, please visit this wonderful museum. It's Goober approved. Stay safe, be kind, and be courteous, everyone.